You want to know what frustrates me more than almost anything in personal finance? Watching someone spend 3 hours researching which S&P 500 ETF has the slightly lower expense ratio while they're simultaneously carrying $8,000 in credit card debt at 24% interest. It's the financial equivalent of arguing about which brand of umbrella to buy while your house is on fire. My name is Ben, and I've spent years studying why smart people make completely irrational decisions with their money. And the number one pattern I keep seeing over and over is this. People obsess over what to invest in when the real question, the one that actually moves the needle, is in what order do you deploy your money? Get the order right and you could realistically end up hundreds of thousands of dollars richer over your lifetime. Get it wrong, and you'll spend decades spinning your wheels, wondering why your portfolio never seems to grow the way the math says it should. If that sounds like something worth understanding, stick around, because today I'm going to lay out the exact sequence you should follow when deciding where every dollar goes. And I promise at least one step is going to surprise you. But first, let me explain why order matters so much in the first place. Think about it like a chess game. The moves you make in the opening determine what's even possible in the middle and end game. A grandmaster doesn't just randomly move pieces and hope for the best. There's a sequence, a logic, a reason why certain moves come before others. Your finances work the same way. The early decisions you make, or fail to make, constrain every decision that comes after them. The problem is that financial content has a massive incentive problem. Talking about the optimal order of operations is boring. Nobody clicks on pay off your credit cards before opening a brokerage account. But millions of people will click on top 5 stocks to buy right now. So the industry feeds people the exciting stuff and quietly ignores the foundational stuff that actually determines outcomes. Let's fix that today. Step 1. Build a cash buffer before you do anything else. Before a single dollar goes into any investment account, you need money sitting in a high-yield savings account doing nothing glamorous except protecting you from yourself. Here's why this is non-negotiable. Without a cash buffer, every unexpected expense, car repair, medical bill, job loss, becomes a financial emergency that forces you to make bad decisions under pressure. You sell investments at the wrong time, you reach for a credit card, you take on debt, and suddenly all the progress you thought you were making evaporates. How much do you need? The standard advice is 3 to 6 months of expenses, but that range is so wide it's practically useless. Here's a better framework. If you have a stable job, a partner who also works, and relatively low fixed expenses, 3 months is probably fine. If you're self-employed, work in a volatile industry, or have dependents relying solely on your income, you want closer to 6 months or more. Start smaller if the full amount feels overwhelming. Get to $1,500 first, then 1 month, then build from there. The point isn't perfection, it's having enough of a cushion that a bad month doesn't become a financial catastrophe. Step 2. Capture your employer match. All of it. This is the one step that jumps the line, and for good reason. If your employer matches retirement contributions and you're not contributing enough to capture the full match, you are turning down free money. I don't say that hyperbolically. An employer match is a literal, guaranteed, immediate return on your investment. If your company matches 50% of your contributions up to 6% of your salary, that's a 50% return before your investments earn a single cent. No index fund, no stock pick, no crypto play gives you a guaranteed 50% return the moment you invest. Nothing comes close. So before you tackle debt aggressively, before you open an IRA, before you do anything else, contribute at least enough to your 401k to get the full employer match. That's the threshold. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. Then we move on. One thing worth noting, check your vesting schedule. Some employers require you to stay for a certain period before their matching contributions are actually yours. Know the rules before you count on that money. Step 3. Eliminate high interest debt. Now we go to war with debt. Anything charging you more than roughly 7 or 8% annually needs to be gone before you invest another dollar beyond that employer match. And in practice, that almost always means credit card debt. The logic here is pure math. If your credit card charges 22% interest and the stock market historically returns around 10% annually before taxes, you are mathematically losing ground every single day you carry that balance while investing. You're pouring water into a bucket with a hole at the bottom and wondering why it won't fill up. The most efficient method is the avalanche approach. List all your debts, pay the minimums on everything, and throw every spare dollar at the highest interest rate first. Once that's gone, roll that payment into the next highest rate. Repeat until the high interest debt is dead. Some people prefer the snowball method. Paying off smallest balances first for the psychological momentum. The math is slightly worse, but if it keeps you consistent, it's better than the technically optimal method you abandon after 2 months. Pick the one you'll actually stick with. Step 4. Max out your IRA. With the high-interest debt gone and your employer match captured, it's time to move into serious tax optimization territory, and your IRA comes before going back to increase your 401k contributions. Here's why. Most employer 401k plans are mediocre. They offer a limited menu of funds, often with expense ratios that are significantly higher than what you'd find on your own. Your IRA, on the other hand, gives you full control. You can invest in any low-cost index fund you want with rock-bottom fees and structure the account exactly the way you choose. For 2025, the IRA contribution limit is $7,000 or $8,000 if you're 50 or older. Now, traditional or Roth? The honest answer is it depends on your situation, but here's the simple version. If you're early in your career and currently in a low tax bracket, lean Roth. You pay taxes now at a lower rate and everything grows tax-free forever. If you're in peak earning years and a high tax bracket, traditional makes more sense. Take the deduction now and pay taxes later when your income drops in retirement. If you're genuinely unsure, splitting contributions between both gives you tax diversification, which is never a bad thing. Step 5. The HSA. The account almost nobody uses correctly. If you have access to a health savings account through a high deductible health plan, pay attention because this is the most underrated account in personal finance. The HSA is the only account in existence that gives you a tax deduction going in, tax-free growth while invested, and tax-free withdrawals for qualified medical expenses. Every other account only gives you 2 of those 3. The HSA gives you all 3. For 2025, you can contribute $4,300 as an individual or $8,550 for family coverage. The strategy that makes HSAs genuinely powerful. If you can afford to pay current medical expenses out of pocket, do it. Let the HSA money stay invested in the market and grow untouched. Save every single receipt. There is no time limit on HSA reimbursements. You can pay for a medical expense today and reimburse yourself from the HSA 15 years from now, completely tax-free. After age 65, the account functions like a traditional IRA for non-medical withdrawals. But since healthcare is one of the largest expenses in retirement, having a dedicated pile of triple tax advantaged money specifically for that purpose is an enormous advantage. Step 6. Go back and max out your 401k. Once the IRA and HSA are maxed, you go back to your employer plan and fill it up. The 2025 limit is $23,500 or $31,000 if you're 50 or older. At this point, between your IRA, HSA, and 401k, you could be sheltering over $35,000 a year from taxation. That is a genuinely significant amount of compounding that the IRS never gets to touch. Most people never reach this step. The average American saves well under 10% of their income. If you're working through this sequence and actually hitting these contribution limits, you are already doing better than the vast majority of people who will ever watch a video like this one. Step 7. Taxable brokerage accounts. Now, finally, we arrive at where most people start: the brokerage account, individual stocks, ETFs, REITs, whatever you want. Taxable accounts are flexible and powerful, but they come with real costs. Every dividend is taxed. Every gain you realize triggers a tax event. Over decades, that drag compounds into a meaningful difference in your final number. That's why they come last. After you've exhausted every tax-advantaged option available to you, the taxable account is where any additional investing dollars go, and at that point, they serve a real purpose. They give you flexibility that retirement accounts don't. Early retirement money, a house down payment, a bridge between leaving work and accessing your 401k. Taxable accounts are the tool for goals outside the retirement account structure. So there it is: emergency fund, employer match, high interest debt, IRA, HSA, max the 401k, then taxable accounts. It's not complicated, but it is counterintuitive, and it requires you to ignore a lot of noise that the financial industry generates to keep you distracted. Follow the sequence, stay boring, and let the math do the work. Your future self won't find it boring at all.